This is Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net with a quick look at the EmpowermentUnlimited.net with a quick look at the second pass of the US Pluto return, where we are. Pluto, you probably heard something. It's all over the web. It's like the new darling, like Mercury retrograde. The planet Pluto, or dwarf planet, whatever you want to call it, is returning to the position that it occupied on July 4th, 1776, which is when the Declaration of Independence was signed. There are varying times of day that are used. The one I use has worked well for me, but this is not the date that the country was actually created, even though we celebrate July 4th as our birthday. There are various other points later in history, and some astrologers use the Constitution chart. We're dealing with the Declaration of Independence chart. Pluto has been traveling back and forth around 27 degrees Capricorn all year, but the return itself has been will be by the end of it exact 3 times. The first time was February 20th, which is when a number of Supreme Court decisions that were later released were actually written. The exact date was February 20th, and within a couple of days, Russia invaded Ukraine. For those of you who want to look at what else this might possibly mean, as we were building up to the second pass of the Pluto return, the Supreme Court issued a whole bunch of opinions that radically rewrote the relationship between religion and state, and between the federal government and state governments, and between the courts and Congress. So for those of you who don't know, I do have a long background as an attorney, and I have never seen anything like the rewriting of all kinds of rules that has been going on by this court. I would hate to be a constitutional law professor at this point, and it is part of rewriting what the ground rules are. The Pluto return, Pluto in Capricorn, is about deconstruction of institutions, things falling apart, cratering, being rebuilt, being built in a different form, priorities being shifted, being changed, the ground rules being rewritten. Also, corruption coming to the surface. Pluto is about things that are hidden, really big power, really huge amounts of money. And this is a feature of what is coming to light about the state of the Union at this point. Now, I have a chart here for the Pluto return, the second pass, which will be exact on Monday, the 11th. I set the chart for noon. I don't know exactly when Pluto hits this point. It's going to be that way pretty much all day. Earlier in the day, the ascendant is going to be in Virgo, and that means that Mercury will be the chart ruler, and Mercury is in the 10th house, coming up close to the sun in the 10th house of the most public part of the chart, and also the executive branch, the executive. And later in the day at noon, the ascendant is Libra, which is about fairness, justice, equality, and the courts. And it's ruled by Venus, which is in Gemini, the sign of multiplicity, many things, lots of communication, in the 9th house of courts. And this Pluto return coincides with 2 public hearings of the January 6th committee and a number of high-level members of the previous administration being subpoenaed by a woman, Venus, to testify in proceedings. Also, there are subpoenas out and depositions that have been ordered by the Attorney General of the state of New York, also a woman, involving the Trump organization. So these are a factor in what is going on with this Pluto return. Also notice that that Uranus, the planet of startling change and epiphanies and enlightenment is conjunct the North Node, the way of the future, in the sign of money and values, in the part in the 8th house of other people's money. There will be a factor here of, in this Pluto return, of the role of money in everything, not just the economy, but the role of money in everything that is coming to light with the Pluto return. And I will also point out that Venus and Saturn are in a pretty close trine. Now, a trine is an easy flow and an unimpeded flow of energy. And this could bring some stability, some order, some progress, some stabilizing of legal proceedings. This also represents an unimpeded dampening of women. This could be a signature for the multiplicity Gemini of laws all over the country now about, with different requirements and penalties for women's bodily autonomy and their reproductive care decisions. Right as this is building just before the Capricorn full moon, so a couple of days after this is exact, but it's still hanging around in effect because it's not a one-day event. It is a long process that just tightens the focus on the 11th. So by the 13th, the moon is going to move into Capricorn. It will be at 21 degrees Capricorn. It will be in an easy flow of a trine to whatever is being broken apart and covered by that Uranus North Node conjunction up there. And the moon will be conjunct Pluto and opposite the sun, because that's always part of a full moon, but then also opposite that Mercury. What in the world does this mean? Well, the moon is in a contact with both of the cosmic change agents. And more importantly, the full moon in Capricorn is going to be a release point for a lot of information, a lot of emotion, some of it very startling, some of it changing perspectives and changing allegiances, possibly with elements of betrayal, 8th house. And it will be a moment of really dumping a whole lot that we've been holding inside, keeping in check. And with Neptune in the 6th, we might be seeing, in an easy link with that, we could be seeing ways in which people have been gaslighting, we've been fooling ourselves, we've been lied to, we've been lying. All of this ought to resonate because it's all over the news. And in this chart also, that Venus, I'll clear this for you so you can see it a little better, that Venus is in a square to Neptune, and that is sacrifice of women, women being the sacrificial lambs for religiosity, which will come up in a second when I show you how this fits in with the July 4th chart. Maybe gaslighting, maybe a lot of just wondering what in the world is really going on with all of that. So here it is around the actual chart that I use. And we see that the Pluto lineup is in the 2nd house of the economy, of money, of values. But let's look at some other things. So the moon in the 1st house of identity is opposite that Venus that I've mentioned, which is on top of the US Mars. Multiple women, multiple conversations, Venus and Gemini, having to do with belief systems and laws of the people. That's that moon in Sagittarius, and dealing with lots of different men with the Mars in Gemini. And yes, the one you're thinking of, it has that Mars is on his Sun and North Node. So the focus is really going to be on the person at the top of all of the investigations that have been going on. But it's not just him, because Gemini is multiplicity. But wait, there's more. So both of these, the moon and Venus, are squaring the US Neptune in Virgo in the house of belief systems, laws, the courts. Neptune in Virgo is the embodiment of the separation of church and state, the Establishment Clause in the US Constitution. It also, some see as a signature for racism. We'll just put that out there. And it is opposite Neptune in the sky right now. Neptune in the sky in the sign of we are all one, in the sign of religiosity. So in the sign that just erases boundaries. So we had this big thing going on about erasing the boundaries, erasing the wall between church and state, letting religiosity come into law, letting religiosity come into court decisions. And this particular standoff of Neptune in Pisces opposite Neptune in Virgo was in place right before the Civil War started in the mid 1800s, 1860s. So we have an argument still going on, and with the moon and Venus and that Venus Mars also squaring all of it. So each point is in a challenging, got to do something aspect to each other point. This is called a grand cross. Basically, nothing happens. Basically, it feels like you're pulled in multiple directions. It sort of slows time, which may give some very interesting and prolonged looks at what has actually been going on. Will be somewhat sobering because you'll notice that Saturn in the sky is coming up on the moon in the US chart, which represents the people, also represents women. So there is a sense of dampening, of obligations, of burdens, of a heaviness. But with this grand cross, there's a sensation of just having to watch things for a while. It's like the Hanged Man in the tarot. And this fits what's going on, actually, because the Supreme Court is in recess and Congress is kind of at an impasse, and a lot isn't really going to change with the makeup of the houses the way they are right now until after the midterms, and possibly not until the next session. So there is a sense here of looking at a lot of things, getting a lot of information, but maybe not actually being able to act on a whole lot of it. And with that, I will point out that the planet that rules information and communication, Mercury at 13 Cancer, is smack on top of the US sun. So there's a high level of emotionality to everything that is going on now. And by the time the moon, which I mentioned, by the time the moon crawls over into Capricorn for the full moon on the 13th, it will move into the second house of money, economy, values. And that's where the moon is going to join Pluto and and then make this link to the Uranus North Node conjunction, there will be the opportunity. There's a lot of risk taking. That Uranus North Node conjunction is in the 5th house of children. Again, we go back to the abortion rights decision, and also risk taking, speculation, which kind of dovetails back into the whole money issue and whose money and other people's money and all of that. So big purge possibility coming with that. A lot of people finally hitting a point of release and clearing out a whole bunch of things so that we can move into something else. So bottom line is things are really intense. A lot's being cleared out. There's a prolonged sense of just having to look at things and coming attractions. Notice that Mars down here in the 5th house at 4 degrees Taurus is ever so slowly making its way to Uranus and the North Node. It'll get there in at the beginning of August. And then after it gets past that, it's going to be in the easy flow of a trine to Pluto from the 6th house of daily routine and service. So lots of action coming, a lot of disclosures this week, and then a lot of action and moving forward, implementing more of what this Pluto return is about at the beginning of August and into the first couple of weeks. I'll have more to say about the return before and then what happens at the end of the year in a later video. For right now, be sure to look at my explanation of the Capricorn full moon, because it gives a lot of hints to all this too. And take it all in as information. Know that things are going to be very rocky and evolutionary for quite some time. So be really good to yourself and to the people around you. If you like this, please subscribe and share. And there's a lot more information at my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and also at my Patreon, patreon.com/Kathy Beal.